Let me start out by thanking everyone who posted their questions, making this video possible. Let's begin. Who were the smartest mobsters you were around that could have been the CEO of a Fortune 500 company? As I've stated plenty of times, there were a lot of guys with great business minds, too many to mention. But in my opinion, the smartest mobsters were those who walked away from that life. People may disagree, but that's my opinion. What were the three words which were commonly used to describe Vic Amuso whenever anybody spoke of him? I'm not sure as to what you're referring to. I've heard the term used, that little guy, which is three words, but for the most part, a person would make a V with their fingers when mentioning Vic. When you were an active member, was anyone still involved in traditional burglary of businesses, homes, banks, and safe jobs? The answer is no, or none that I was aware of. I think safe jobs are a thing of the past. For instance, my friend Johnny Santoro used to rob banks and even told me about a time when they broke into a warehouse and stayed the entire weekend, emptying the place out. The good old days. Does being made into a family automatically lead to better earnings compared to an associate? I believe we've had this before. I don't know about it automatically leading to a person earning more money, but as I've mentioned, it definitely opens up the door to more capabilities to earn. Does a family have one person who's dedicated to keeping track what soldiers, what crew, who's the captain, who's acting, or is that the boss's job to keep track? Most things are not written down. If they are, I had no knowledge of who that person was who kept such paperwork. Keep in mind, an administration knows exactly who their captains are. I've heard that there were lists of which members are part of each crew, but again, I don't know who possessed that list. You said in a previous video that guys in a life call people with 9 to 5 jobs suckers. Did they have the same opinion for made guys that also had 9 to 5 jobs? Well, what I did say was some guys refer to civilians as suckers. And no, they didn't call friends suckers because 95% of the mob had legitimate jobs. Are there any repercussions for killing an innocent person not involved with the life, or is it overlooked? I don't necessarily believe there would be any repercussions, but I imagine it would depend on the situation. Why do you think the Genovese family had fewer informants in comparison to the other families? First and foremost, they were ruled by Chin, who had a tight grip on his members. The West Side's a rich family, so I think the fact that the people in positions were wealthy enough not to be greedy, and that had a lot to do with it. Another factor is they were extremely careful, as well as secretive in what they did. Most of their members were on a need-to-know basis only. Is it true that members of that life don't wake up every day thinking about how to commit crimes? They wake up and go about their business, but are willing to resort to illegal means if it will further benefit their economic interest. I obviously have no way of knowing what's on anyone's mind when they get out of bed, but I don't believe everyone wakes up thinking of crimes to commit, even in that life. And yes, if there's money to be made, guys will resort to committing crimes to earn, and that's part of that life. Have you ever met guys from the Androgeda or the Camorra? I've mentioned that I've met members of the Androgeda, but not the Camorra, to my knowledge. This next set of questions is in reference to the Castellano hit. Can you remember where you were when you heard? How did you feel about it at the time? Was it a complete surprise, or were there rumors it took place due to Castellano's legal problems? And was the friction between Castellano, Della Croce, and the Gotti crew known? And at what point did it become common knowledge Gotti was behind it? At the time, I was 16 years old and living in Ozone Park. I believe I heard it on the news, and of course it was big news. I really didn't think much of it, aside from wondering, like most people, who did it. Initially, besides the people in the know, nobody, and I mean the average civilian, knew of any of the internal beefs within the Gambino family. And it became apparent within a few days that Gotti was behind it. Do you think there will ever come a time when a guy can get made and not be 100% Italian? Again, I believe this is another question which is repeatedly asked. And by the way, sometimes in the comments, I'll just respond with asked and answered. And for those of you who are not trolls, I'm not trying to sound condescending. Please understand, a great deal of these questions are repeatedly asked, and to take the time to explain each one is not something I can do. So to answer the above question, my answer is I don't believe that rule will ever change. But by the way things are going, who knows? Could Messino give the order Or would it have to come from Rastelli? Naturally, this person's referring to the Bonventre murder. Technically, as the boss, Rastelli would either give or approve the order, and I believe in this situation, Messino most likely received Rastelli's permission. After the Donnie Brasco incident, did they really make it that you had to be an associate for 15 years? That was way before my time. I personally never heard of that. And how long a person remains an associate usually depends on the family's administration approving the proposed member. A lot of the comments following the Bonventre video use the word zips. And I'm not going to keep repeating myself. So here it is. Just as other derogatory names are used to describe other ethnic groups, that word is derogatory towards Italians. One person who used the word said he thought they, meaning Italians from Italy or Sicily, couldn't be made into a family in the United States. This is totally incorrect. In order for them to be recognized or conduct Cosa Nostra business, they absolutely must be straightened out here first. If you were Messino, wouldn't an alliance between Cesare and Vito Rizzuto concern you, or even concern other families? My answer is no. An alliance between Sicilians in a family is only natural. As far as other families having concern, here's a good example in present time. With the Sicilian faction of the Gambino family, it's commonly known that they once again have a bridge to Sicily, and I don't believe any of the other families are concerned about that fact. In my recent video about the FBI's antics, I believe I was extremely transparent. I even posted pictures of my cell logs and didn't blur out the times former Agent Otto and I spent on those calls, because there's nothing to hide. Nonetheless, one person felt the need to leave the following question. Why did the agent keep you on the phone for an hour and 14 minutes? First, that conversation was a back and forth one, so it wasn't him keeping me on the phone. There are obviously personal things I shared during those calls that I'm not going to speak about. Hence, why I answered this person, none of your business. You've spoken about infighting between crews. In your opinion, to what extent did these beefs hinder the family's earning ability beyond the usual? It wouldn't have much effect, other than if a decision needed to be made on a certain business. There's always going to be beefs in that life, but business and earning money overshadows them. And for the last question, this person said, in all aspects of life, there's something positive we can learn or take. So for you, what did the mob have that was positive? I'd first like to say it's true. In any situation, if we look open-mindedly, we can find positivity. Unfortunately, most of us, and I was guilty of this myself, focus on the negative. One of the biggest obstacles we as people face is worrying, which is truly a waste of time. For one, most of what we worry about don't take place. And what does take place, worrying about it is not going to change it. In lieu of Patreon, I mentioned the Super Thanks icon found underneath this video in the 3-dot dropdown for anyone who wants to show appreciation for videos like this. In addition, for those of you who've sent money to PayPal, I thank you. Unfortunately, PayPal doesn't permit me to send a message because it's a business account. I've tried emailing a few people, but I'm not sure if they received it, so I thank you again. The mob itself is a negative environment. Most people in the mob don't view it that way because they're unable to do so as an outsider looking in. With that said, the positives I came away with were the result of after my leaving that life. One was realizing how valuable our time is, because in that life, your time is not your own. Another positive is the importance of the word friend. That word to me now has much greater meaning. Conversely, the mob taught me the opposite. So in reality, the mob made me understand the true meaning of the word. And the last positive takeaway I'll share is the mob taught me to appreciate simplicity. Let's be honest, the mob's anything but simple. In fact, it's arguably a life that's over the top. Life for some people will humble you. It may happen in what we first believe or view as misfortune, which again is focusing on the negative. But take it from me, and I speak from personal experience, it's definitely a positive, one disguised as misfortune. I think in any situation, and in this case even the mob, we can take away something positive. And in my case, that was taking mistakes I've made and turning them into valuable lessons.